Chapter 966, True Face. Everything that happened outside the seventh prince's city was obviously seen by the experts in the other three heavens legacy cities and the three princes outside. They weren't too far away, and the laws of death from the black-robed person shook the hearts of countless experts. Due to the appearance of the black-robed person, the ninth prince's advantage was instantly destroyed, and they had to retreat. If it wasn't for the fact that Zhao Feng put away his beasts in time, normal king-level beasts would have been instantly killed by the power of death. This black-robed person is too terrifying. The three princes' forces outside were silent before an emperor exclaimed. You can only blame that Zhao Feng made too many enemies. Shui Yuan started to gloat. The strength that the black-robed person displayed made even the two sacred lords of the seventh prince's team extremely wary. This meant that Zhao Feng would definitely die. Luckily, we didn't invite the ninth prince. The second prince felt lucky. It was obvious that the black-robed person's target was Zhao Feng, and his laws of death were too strong. They countered all living things, especially souls. Any shockwave of power contained unimaginable power. On the wall of the eighth prince's city. Who is that black-robed person? Yu Lenghua murmured. Even sacred lords didn't dare to be arrogant against the black-robed person who controlled the laws of death. The Emperor of Death should be dead. The eighth prince and Luo Xun were stunned. To be able to control such strong power of death, they could only think of the Emperor of Death, who had the Eye of Death. Zhao Feng won't lose. Yu Diao now looked at the ninth prince's team and the black-robed person who were moving into the distance. Apart from everyone in the imperial tombs being shocked at the black-robed person's strength, everyone in the imperial palace was also stunned. Zhao Feng, not good. Sacred Lord Dark Soul from the seventh prince's team has come over as well. Old Ying's heart shook when he saw a dark beam of light flying over from the distance. At the same time, his soul eye locked onto the black-robed person, and his expression changed. They all left the seventh prince's heaven's legacy city, but this black-robed person was still chasing after them. One had to know that the ninth prince's team had 8 people. Even though they might not be strong individually, they could easily finish off the black-robed person if they teamed up. However, the black-robed person looked as if he wasn't scared, and he completely ignored everyone else apart from Zhao Feng. He most likely had a hidden card that could allow him to ignore the other members of the ninth prince's team. Who? A pair of scarlet wings of lightning spread behind Zhao Feng's back. Whoosh! Zhao Feng turned into a streak of scarlet lightning and split away from the ninth prince's team, moving several miles away. At the same time, Zhao Feng's voice sounded in the minds of the ninth prince's team members. I'll leave Sacred Lord Dark Soul to you. Okay. The ninth prince and his team agreed. From their point of view, the black-robed person was even stronger than Sacred Lord Dark Soul, especially since he controlled the power of death and they had nothing to counter it. Old Ying knew what Zhao Feng meant. They couldn't let the black-robed person and Sacred Lord Dark Soul team up. The 7 of them were enough to stop Sacred Lord Dark Soul. They just hoped that no accidents would happen to Zhao Feng. Who tilde? Death Instant Shadow. The black-robed person turned into a dark beam of light and quickly followed after Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng, you won't be able to escape. The black-robed person's ghastly voice was like maggots that were stuck in one's bone as it sounded behind Zhao Feng's back. Zhao Feng's heart felt heavy. The Death Instant Shadow was a technique that the Emperor of Death used in the past as well, but the black-robed person's cultivation had reached the quasi-sacred lord level, and his laws of death were even stronger. Zhao Feng wouldn't be able to escape even if he used the lightning wing's spatial flash. Humph. Who said I was going to run away? Zhao Feng only left the ninth prince's group so that the black-robed person and Sacred Lord Dark Soul wouldn't be able to team up. Furthermore, he would kill the black-robed person no matter what his true identity was. Who? Zhao Feng suddenly stopped and looked at the black-robed person with fiery eyes. Humph, just like the past. You don't know what life and death are. The black-robed person laughed coldly as his intent of death covered Zhao Feng. Boom. The Blood Devil Sun bloodline within Zhao Feng's body started to burn, and a glass-like fire covered his body. At the same time, a terrifying surge of fire burned through the intent of death nearby. Boom. Zhao Feng turned into a ball of fire and lightning and shot toward the black-robed person. He first had to find out the true face of this black-robed person. Right now, he was only guessing that he was the Emperor of Death. Oh? You seem to have obtained a decent bloodline, the black-robed person said. The perfect Blood Devil Sun bloodline was ranked within the top 10 among Imperial Dao bloodlines, and the black-robed person could obviously feel this, but he acted like he still didn't care. Ding. Bam. Zhao Feng, who was surrounded by scarlet red lightning, clashed with the black-robed person's scythe of death. Who tilde? The perfect Blood Devil Sun bloodline instantly ignited the black-robed person, but the red flames were soon extinguished by a surge of death intent. The intent of death killed everything. Even strong fires would eventually die out. Zhao Feng's eyes focused. He had expected this much. If his sacred lightning body had reached the 6th level, the ignition effect of the perfect Blood Devil Sun bloodline probably wouldn't be countered so much. However, Zhao Feng was very surprised by one point: the lifesteal effect of the Blood Devil Sun bloodline didn't seem to work very much. In the instant just now, Zhao Feng's perfect Blood Devil Sun bloodline didn't manage to absorb any blood essence from the black-robed person's body. Only a part of his yuan qi was absorbed. When Zhao Feng got too close to the black-robed person, the life force within his body was eroded by the intent of death. What a powerful body! And this power of lightning! The black-robed person was slightly surprised. This power of lightning seemed like it could resist his intent of death. Humph! Zhao Feng snickered coldly and circulated his sacred lightning body. At the same time, he completely released his perfect Blood Devil Sun bloodline and threw out a scarlet fist of lightning. Zhao Feng wasn't dumb. Why would he fight against the black-robed person head-on when he controlled the intent of death? He had merged large amounts of ancient lightning from the ancient dream realm into his sacred lightning body, and this ancient lightning was able to fight back against the intent of death to a certain degree. However, Zhao Feng could still feel the life force within his body start to fade away. From this, one could see how terrifying the intent of death was. Humph! Zhao Feng, you will die today. Zhao Feng's countless methods seemed to make the black-robed person remember something, and he harumphed in anger. The intent of death started to form a field of darkness. Death force field. The power of death within the field was like black ink as it killed all life force within it. Even the heaven-earth yuan qi was forcefully absorbed. The instant the death force field appeared, Zhao Feng felt his life force flowing away even faster. Boom. Bang. The death force field restricted the release of Zhao Feng's perfect Blood Devil Sun bloodline, and it unleashed a wave of repulsion. Zhao Feng had an ugly expression. The death force field was also a secret technique of the Emperor of Death. Who tilde? Zhao Feng used the scarlet wings of lightning to retreat. Who? A surge of terrifying death intent landed where Zhao Feng was just standing, engulfing the area. Zhao Feng, die. Even stronger intent of death appeared around the black-robed person's body like evil ghosts floating in the air. All the life force and yuan qi within several miles were devoured and entered the black-robed person's scythe of death. Zhao Feng's eyebrows furrowed as he maintained his distance from the black-robed person. The life force within Zhao Feng's body started to fade away even faster facing such strong intent of death. If it wasn't for the fact that Zhao Feng's left eye had evolved and he now had a God Tribulation lightning soul body, even his soul might have withered against this power. At this point, the power that the black-robed person was displaying had easily surpassed normal sacred lords, and it countered the soul. Even sacred Lord Sharp Edge didn't dare to get close. Boom. Who? The black-robed person slashed forward with the scythe of death, and a black crescent moon several dozen yards long swept toward Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng's expression remained the same as an ancient and desolate chaotic power of lightning radiated from him and merged into the air. This was the first time he was using his little world to fight. A little world that can merge with this ancient dimension? The black-robed person was slightly surprised. One had to know that even his little world wasn't able to merge into this dimension. At the most, he could only use it to protect himself. It had the same effect as the death force field. The black-robed person's power was slightly suppressed by Zhao Feng's little world of wind lightning. Who? The black-robed person's attack was weakened due to Zhao Feng's little world, but the black crescent moon still took away part of the life force within his body. Damn it, at this rate, the sacred lightning body and the perfect Blood Devil Sun bloodline will start to weaken. Zhao Feng felt troubled for the first time. Back then, the Emperor of Death's intent of death mostly just countered the soul, and Zhao Feng was able to resist it and kill the Emperor of Death by relying on his god eye. However, the intent of death that this black-robed person gave off countered both the soul and the physical world. If this continued, Zhao Feng probably wouldn't even be able to maintain his sacred lightning body. Decisiveness flashed through Zhao Feng's eyes. Blood Devil Charge. Zhao Feng circulated his perfect Blood Devil Sun bloodline to the maximum as the life force within his body quickly faded away. The glass-like flames around Zhao Feng's body expanded, and the sound of crackling flames could be heard. The image of a blood-red sun with a spinning whirlpool in the middle appeared behind him. Lightning Wings Spatial Flash. Hu tilde. Zhao Feng flew into the air and used the Blood Devil Charge, and he used the wings to propel himself downward. With the addition of his little world, this was his strongest attack. He was like a flaming meteor, and he gave off a terrifying pressure of fire and lightning as he charged toward the black-robed person in the center of the death force field. This attack was Zhao Feng's strongest attack yet. This attack will reveal your true face. Chapter 967, Samsara Immortal Body. This attack will reveal your true face. This was the strongest attack Zhao Feng had ever unleashed. It contained the fire of wind lightning, the sacred lightning body, the Blood Devil Sun bloodline, the Blood Devil Charge, the Lightning Wing Spatial Flash, and some other techniques. Whoosh! At this moment, Zhao Feng turned into a blazing flash of lightning and descended directly in front of the black-robed person. His terrifying physical force completely ignored the laws and intents of the black-robed person's death force field as he punched forward. Zhao Feng, did you give up on the God Eye and choose body strengthening after recultivating? The black-robed person laughed coldly and spoke in a ghastly voice when Zhao Feng's fist was only a few centimeters away from his body. Zhao Feng's expression changed dramatically. He could still hear what the black-robed person said even though the force of his punch covered everything. Zhao Feng was even more sure of the black-robed person's identity from this sentence. However, what truly stunned Zhao Feng wasn't what the black-robed person said, but the black-robed person himself. He was able to stand there in the face of Zhao Feng's punch. The black-robed person didn't even react at all, as if he had given up. This made Zhao Feng feel that something was off. Boom. The black-robed person's body was engulfed by Zhao Feng's attack, and his body was blasted apart by the terrifying attack of fire and lightning. The black-robed person's yuan soul remained standing in the air. After all, the attack Zhao Feng just unleashed was a purely physical attack. However, a forbidden undulation of death energy came from behind him and caused Zhao Feng's soul to shake. After bashing the black-robed person's body into pieces, Zhao Feng immediately used the scarlet wings of lightning to stabilize himself and turn around. Countless runes and talismans filled the half-transparent black soul, making it look fierce and terrifying. There was a pair of black eyes in the head of the soul. Within the eyes was an everlasting whirlpool that seemed to lead to the endless abyss of death. Eyes of Death. Zhao Feng immediately called out. The appearance of this yuan soul was also extremely similar to the Emperor of Death. But how could this possibly be the Emperor of Death? Zhao Feng started to panic after seeing this. The Emperor of Death used his life as the price to activate the curse words of death. How could he still be alive and still have the eyes of death? Dark Eye Death Flames. Limitless power of death shot out from the black eyes in the Emperor of Death's yuan soul and turned into a black streak of light that caught Zhao Feng off guard and hit him head-on. Zhao Feng's body went cold as he felt the danger of death in his soul and body. Hu tilde. The Dark Eye Death Flames started to fight against Zhao Feng's sacred lightning body and Blood Devil Sun bloodline. At the same time, a black fire started to burn in Zhao Feng's soul. This fire contained the laws of death that made everything slowly wither and decay. Boom. More than 2,000 symbols of God Tribulation lightning flashed in Zhao Feng's lightning soul body. Zhao Feng's soul contained the power of God Tribulation lightning, which could be used to refine the soul at any moment. Zhao Feng had even managed to use his lightning soul body to absorb the power of the ancient lightning. However, the Dark Eye Death Flames that the Emperor of Death used wasn't on the same level as the past, and it gave Zhao Feng the feeling that he was aging. Who? Countless flashes of lightning intertwined with the wave of black flames, and they started to erode each another. On one side was death, and on the other side was destruction. Both were terrifying forces. Who? The God Tribulation lightning completely destroyed the last wave of black flames. After all, this was just one attack from the Emperor of Death, whereas Zhao Feng's soul contained all of his power. However, not every inch of Zhao Feng's soul had the power of God Tribulation lightning imprinted in it. The power of the Dark Eye Death Flames covered everything, and some of it managed to touch Zhao Feng's soul. The lifespan of my soul has decreased. Zhao Feng was stunned. The Emperor of Death's soul technique was destroyed by his god Tribulation Lightning, but the laws of death still managed to touch his lightning soul body. One had to know that Zhao Feng's soul had reached the level of a sacred lord. The stronger one's soul was, the more resilient it was against soul attacks. Zhao Feng's resilience surpassed beginning stage sacred lords who specialized in the soul. This meant that, if it was a normal sacred lord taking the Emperor of Death's attack head-on instead of Zhao Feng, their soul lifespan would decrease by at least 1,000 years, depending on their soul strength. The wisp of black flames that landed on Zhao Feng's body also stole part of his life force. Your soul. Zhao Feng wasn't the only one stunned. The Emperor of Death also revealed a shocked expression. Ever since the start of the battle, Zhao Feng only used physical attacks. This made the Emperor of Death think that the growth of Zhao Feng's soul intent was slow after he took a different body. However, even after using his new laws of death that he had learned, the Emperor of Death's Forbidden Eye bloodline technique was still blocked by Zhao Feng. This meant that Zhao Feng's soul intent was on par with his own. Both had reached the level of sacred lords. It seems like I have underestimated you once again. You're not even an emperor yet, but you already have the soul intent of someone at the early stages of the mystic light realm. As expected of the owner of a god eye. The Emperor of Death's Yuan soul let out a cold laugh instead of feeling regretful. Emperor of Death, how are you still alive? Zhao Feng stared at the Emperor of Death's Yuan soul and questioned. Who tilde? Countless black dust particles around the Emperor of Death started to gather and form skin, flesh, and bones. At the end was a completely black-robed body, which then covered the Emperor of Death's Yuan soul. This is... Zhao Feng's left eye saw that the dust and body parts he destroyed had returned to their original form, as if time had moved backward. At this instant, Zhao Feng felt an indescribable, terrifying, and irresistible intent from the black-robed body. This power was similar to time, death, and destruction. It was one of the ultimate intents of heaven and earth. Who said that I'm alive? The Emperor of Death didn't reply to Zhao Feng's question and revealed a smug expression. He liked seeing the shock and panic that Zhao Feng revealed. Zhao Feng wanted to curse after hearing the Emperor of Death's response, but he didn't say anything. All his attention was completely on the Emperor of Death's body. The Emperor of Death's body was extremely weird. It was even stronger than the immortal death body. It had reached an incredulous level. The immortal death body had an undying attribute. In theory, there was no weaknesses in terms of survivability. However, once the body was destroyed, the soul would gradually weaken on its own. This was the reason why the Emperor of Death tried to find a body after self-destructing. However, even after getting decimated by Zhao Feng's ultimate attack, the Emperor of Death's body just recovered like nothing happened. Zhao Feng had never heard of an immortal and undying body like this. This meant that, if Zhao Feng wanted to kill the Emperor of Death, he had to kill the Emperor of Death's soul since his body could just recover to its original state even if it was broken into bits. Zhao Feng suddenly remembered something else too, the curse words of death. If he killed the Emperor of Death once more, would he activate the curse words of death on Zhao Feng again? Zhao Feng started to become wary and his gaze moved back and forth. No. Zhao Feng finally realized what was wrong. If the Emperor of Death could use the curse words of death more than once, then he wouldn't have been killed and forced to recultivate multiple times in the past. If he could, then the Emperor of Death would have been famous for having the ability to kill sacred lords very easily, but Zhao Feng had never heard of any news about the curse words of death when he was in the true martial sacred land. Humph, I don't believe that you can use the curse words of death again. Zhao Feng's heart was as clear as a mirror, and he cleared out all the fear of the curse words of death. It doesn't matter whether you're alive or not. I'll just kill you again or die trying. Zhao Feng's soul was clear, and the power of his soul became purer and stronger. His willpower was unchanged. Hearing what Zhao Feng said, the Emperor of Death's eyes became disappointed and helpless, but they were soon replaced by limitless anger and hatred. Zhao Feng, I told you that I will make you beg for death for eternity. The Emperor of Death roared in anger. Wind lightning eye flame. Zhao Feng circulated his soul intent, and his left eye flashed with a faint golden color. At the same time, he poured his soul power into his left eye. A stunning fire surrounded by purple and gold light instantly shot out from Zhao Feng's left eye. The faint glimmer of God Tribulation lightning could be seen in the gold and purple glow. Why would Zhao Feng just stand there and not counterattack after being hit by the Emperor of Death's dark eye death flames? Whoosh tilde. A ball of transparent gold and purple lightning fire with an aura of destruction landed on the Emperor of Death's face. Since Zhao Feng's soul intent had reached the level of sacred lords and he was using a secret eye bloodline technique that contained the power of God Tribulation Lightning, he could threaten the souls of early-stage sacred lords. This was the first Zhao Feng was using his eye bloodline techniques at full force after entering the imperial tombs. Everyone he had met so far were either too weak or didn't need to be killed. Arg tilde. The Emperor of Death screamed as the gold and purple lightning fire and the power of God Tribulation Lightning ravaged his body. At the same time, the Emperor of Death's soul, which was filled with mysterious marks and symbols, was bombarded by the countless flames of lightning. Zhao Feng lost part of his life force and his soul lifespan to the Emperor of Death's laws of death. However, Zhao Feng also dealt unrecoverable damage to the Emperor of Death's soul. Hoo-hoo. The Emperor of Death's body was destroyed by the power of fire and lightning, but it soon started to recover once more. However, this time, Zhao Feng could see that there were some scorch marks on the Emperor of Death's black robes. A light flashed through Zhao Feng's eyes, as I thought, the power of God Tribulation Lightning is still effective against you. Zhao Feng, you've gotten too full of yourself. I will show you a brand new intent of death and the ultimate eye bloodline techniques of death. The Emperor of Death's black eyes twinkled with hatred. However, he could just see the scene of Zhao Feng dying to his ultimate eye bloodline techniques of death. While Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death were fighting, the figures of Old Ying and Shi Lai appeared in the distance. Old Ying was filled with shock when he saw the black-robed person's body recovering after being destroyed so thoroughly. His expression changed dramatically and he immediately called out, "Zhao Feng, watch out. The Emperor of Death now has a samsara immortal body." Chapter 968, Samsara of Death. I didn't think there would be someone here that recognized the samsara immortal body. The Emperor of Death glanced at Old Ying in the distance before completely ignoring him. Samsara immortal body? Zhao Feng exclaimed before starting to think. The moment he destroyed the Emperor of Death's body, he realized that it wasn't the Emperor of Death's original body. The mysterious power from the black-robed body made Zhao Feng think about the 8 great god eyes. Only the Emperor of Death's soul had been revived. Eye of Samsara. With this evidence and Old Ying's words, Zhao Feng could only think of this unique eye among the descendants of the 8 great god eyes. He wasn't too sure about the abilities of the Eye of Samsara, but Zhao Feng was certain that the Emperor of Death's immortal and undying body was related to Eye of Samsara. The Emperor of Death had been stuck at the Void God realm for several thousand years. Even if he was reborn or something, Zhao Feng didn't believe that the Emperor of Death would be able to suddenly become a quasi-sacred lord after only several years. Zhao Feng, you were the one that made me like this. After his true identity was revealed, the Emperor of Death released an angry roar, and the power of death radiated from his body. I didn't want you to become like this. I just wanted you to die. Zhao Feng looked at the Emperor of Death coldly. That was what he truly wished for. However, Zhao Feng could feel pain in the Emperor of Death's words. Why would there be pain if he was lucky enough to revive and obtain a quasi-sacred lord-level immortal body? Zhao Feng couldn't imagine the price that the Emperor of Death had to pay to revive. This price was most likely even more painful than death. Zhao Feng believed that a price was necessary to obtain power. An example was Nangongsheng obtaining the power of the evil god. If his heart and mind weren't strong enough, he might have been demonized, which would have meant the true Nangongsheng's death. Humph. Zhao Feng looked at the Emperor of Death. If he could kill the Emperor of Death once, then he could kill him again. Wind Lightning Eye Flame. Zhao Feng activated his left eye and used the Wind Lightning Eye Flame once again. This was the eye bloodline technique with the biggest effect on the Emperor of Death. The power of God Tribulation Lightning contained within it was effective against the Emperor of Death's body and soul. Arg tilde. Zhao Feng, it's useless. The Emperor of Death howled as he bore Zhao Feng's attack. It's not just my body that's immortal, my soul is as well. The Emperor of Death's cold laughter sounded. Zhao Feng's heart jumped and his eyebrows locked together, but he didn't respond to the Emperor of Death. The scorch marks on the Emperor of Death's black robes hadn't recovered yet. He could also feel that the damage to the Emperor of Death's soul hadn't recovered either. Why would the Emperor of Death say that his soul was immortal as well? How could that be possible? It was utterly ridiculous. Zhao Feng, the soul of anyone with a samsara immortal body is indeed immortal, Old Ying's voice sounded from the distance. Zhao Feng almost fell over. Even old Ying said that too? How could that be possible? Even if you destroy his soul today, the Emperor of Death will still be able to crawl out from the samsara of death. Old Ying's voice was trembling as he looked at the Emperor of Death. Old Ying? Are you sure you've remembered correctly? How is that possible? Shi Yuli couldn't believe it, and his body shook when he looked at the Emperor of Death. Both the body and soul were immortal? How was that possible? Was this the ability of the Eye of Samsara? That would be too incredible. Shi Yuli, you've understood it wrong. Old Ying sighed before looking at the Emperor of Death sadly. The soul of someone that has entered the samsara of death can never be reincarnated. They can't die even if they want to. All they can do is travel across the borders of samsara. The body that the Emperor of Death currently has was created by the Eye of Samsara. He can't even take over another body. Old Ying had a solemn expression as he slowly told them an old piece of information. That? Shi Yuli's heart jumped when he heard this. The Emperor of Death couldn't die even if he wished to. He would never able to rest in peace or be reincarnated. All he could do was travel across the borders of samsara. Zhao Feng obviously heard what old Ying said as well and was utterly shocked. He never would have thought that the price would be so big. This meant that the Emperor of Death's soul was indeed immortal, which also meant that the curse words of death definitely couldn't be used anymore. If one couldn't even die, how were they supposed to activate the curse words of death? The potential of someone that enters the samsara of death is reduced dramatically. The Emperor of Death is just lucky that he has the eyes of death and managed to comprehend something by dying. However, this is as far as he goes. Old Ying was also stunned. Probably only the owner of the eyes of death had the ability to improve by dying. However, even though this was the Emperor of Death's final progress, he would still be able to travel wherever he wished in the Great Gon Lord dynasty with his strength and laws of death. Zhao Feng, I will never die, but you will eventually be killed by me. The Emperor of Death roared with seething hatred as he saw Zhao Feng's stunned expression. Ultimate Eye bloodline techniques of death. The Emperor of Death's expression changed as he revealed a cruel smile. Wang tilde. The Emperor of Death's eyes suddenly started to spin, and limitless power of death merged into the center of the whirlpool. The area around the Emperor of Death turned black like an abyss of death that was completely devoid of life. Gaze of death. A cold voice resounded throughout the soul dimension and caused everything within 1,000 miles to go silent. The hood over the Emperor of Death's head suddenly fell back, revealing a head covered in bandages and a pair of black eyes of death that radiated a limitless aura of death. It was like he was the heavenly Tao as he gazed down quietly at Zhao Feng. At this moment in time, the hearts of countless beings turned cold with uneasiness. It was as if they were covered by the shadow of death, and they were completely unable to block this power. All they could do was let it do whatever it wanted. Hee, this move again? Both your soul and mine have reached the early stages of the mystic light realm. How can this move be effective against me? Zhao Feng was surprised, but he soon let out a laugh. The gaze of death had been useless against Zhao Feng for a long time now, but the Emperor of Death shouldn't be so dumb that he would use it for no reason. Zhao Feng carefully circulated his soul intent and prepared to resist the Emperor of Death's gaze of death. Hee, Zhao Feng, after experiencing the samsara of death, my laws of death have become more powerful. Today, you will die. The Emperor of Death laughed coldly when he saw Zhao Feng remain so calm. Boom. An eye bloodline technique of death that rose into the heavens landed on Zhao Feng. Limitless intent of death bound Zhao Feng's body and soul. Zhao Feng stiffened, and his heart went cold. This isn't the gaze of death. Zhao Feng was shocked. The gaze of death that the Emperor of Death used now was completely different from before. The gaze of death this time didn't pull out the soul, instead, it just continuously eroded and stole away the life force in his body and the lifespan of his soul. All life within 1,000 miles was affected by the Emperor of Death's gaze of death, and their life force slowly drained away. Flowers withered, and beasts aged into piles of bones. Even rocks seemed to be eroded by time until they turned to dust in the wind. The entire world seemed to turn into a world of death. Nothing would remain at the end. What is this? Shi Yuli, run! Old Ying roared. He was several dozen miles away, but he could still feel a terrifying power of death lock onto him. The life within his body quickly faded away, and he lost several dozen years of his soul lifespan. Whoosh! Shi Yuli and Old Ying quickly retreated out of the range of the Emperor of Death's eye bloodline technique as their hearts thudded. What will Zhao Feng do against such a terrifying technique of death? Shi Yuli was full of fear. He specialized in body strengthening, so he had more life force within his body, which meant he could clearly feel how scary the Emperor of Death's eye bloodline technique was. Furthermore, he was only hit the shockwave. How much intent of death would Zhao Feng, who was right in the middle of the gaze of death, need to face? You have the God Eye protecting you, so my gaze of death wouldn't be able to suck away your soul anyway. After comprehending the new laws of death, I made a gaze of death specifically for you. The Emperor of Death laughed smugly as he circulated his eye bloodline and released an even more powerful intent of death. The new gaze of death was his strongest attack so far. The body and soul of anyone locked onto by this attack would start to slowly walk into death and finally turn into ashes. However, there was one thing that would be unaffected by the intent of death. Only the God Eye will remain after your body and soul disappear, the Emperor of Death's cold voice sounded in Zhao Feng's mind. The new gaze of death was made specifically for Zhao Feng. It was prepared in order to steal his ninth God's Eye. The Emperor of Death's target had always been the God Eye. What powerful death intent! From the looks of it, the Emperor of Death has gambled everything on this attack. Zhao Feng was shocked. The Emperor of Death had poured all his soul power and intent of death into this new gaze of death. At this instant, Zhao Feng's life force was rapidly decreasing, and the sacred lightning body started to dim. At the same time, the lifespan of his soul was also reducing. Even though Zhao Feng's soul had evolved into a lightning soul body and contained the power of God Tribulation Lightning, he wasn't able to fight back against the gaze of death. No, I can't just stand here and wait to be killed. Apart from his left eye, Zhao Feng's body and his soul weren't able to move at all since he was bound by the intent of death. Zhao Feng took a deep breath, and a flashing golden glow started to appear in his left eye. A deep golden-purple whirlpool seemed to connect to a golden-purple world of illusions surrounded by mist within Zhao Feng's left eye. Gaze of the God Eye. A powerful suction force appeared from Zhao Feng's God's spiritual eye. This was the only thing Zhao Feng could do, use the gaze of the God Eye to absorb the Emperor of Death's soul into the dimension of his left eye. If he did this, the Emperor of Death's gaze of death would naturally disappear. A black soul started to slowly leave the black-robed body. It's useless, Zhao Feng. Your soul and my soul have the same strength. The Emperor of Death laughed wickedly. The Emperor of Death fought back against Zhao Feng's pulling force. I will be able to escape the samsara of death and gain new life if I obtain your God Eye. Chapter 969, God Eye Disintegration. I will be able to escape the samsara of death and gain new life if I obtain your God Eye. The Emperor of Death revealed an excited and fierce expression. This was the only chance he had. Wang tilde boom. The new gaze of death faced the gaze of the God Eye, and the two terrifying eye intents clashed against each another, causing the nearby black mist to intertwine with the golden purple light. At the same time, a terrifying soul aura spread across a 1,000-mile radius, transforming the nearby area into a forbidden zone. Boom. All the symbols of God Tribulation Lightning within Zhao Feng's soul flashed. His soul was like the creator of lightning, and lightning spread throughout his soul and blocked the erosion from the intent of death. At the same instant, Zhao Feng circulated the sacred lightning body without caring about the price. Right now, victory would be decided by endurance. If he managed to suck the Emperor of Death's soul into the dimension of his left eye, then he would win. If the Emperor of Death managed to suck away all of Zhao Feng's life force first, then it would be the Emperor of Death's victory. However, the situation wasn't looking very good. The Emperor of Death's soul intent and Zhao Feng's were on the same level, and Zhao Feng's gaze of the God Eye was modified from the gaze of death in the first place, which meant that the Emperor of Death's resistance to it was extremely powerful. At this point in time, only the Emperor of Death's head was pulled out. On the other hand, Zhao Feng's sacred lightning body was already reaching its limits. The lightning around his body was dimming. Luckily, Zhao Feng also had the lightning soul body, so the weakening of his soul was relatively slow. After all, countless symbols of God Tribulation Lightning were imprinted in Zhao Feng's soul and had started to affect it, giving it some attributes of the laws of destruction. Your life force and soul are much stronger than what I first thought, but that will only allow you to last a little longer on the borders of death, the Emperor of Death's voice sounded in the soul dimension. Although part of the Emperor of Death's soul had been pulled out, his eyes were still trained on Zhao Feng. A huge amount of death intent surrounded Zhao Feng and slowly devoured him. At the same time, more than 1,000 miles away. Zhao Feng, I'll come help you. The ninth prince's voice sounded. Your Highness, please be careful, Old Ying warned. A golden light started to pour out from the ninth prince's pseudo-crown prince seal and started to form dragons around him. Relying on draconic providence, the ninth prince was able to enter the area where Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death were fighting. Ninth prince. Zhao Feng faltered for a moment. Zhao Feng, who was currently using his full power to fight against the gaze of death, could faintly sense the ninth prince and the pseudo-crown prince seal. The pseudo-crown prince seal was much dimmer than before, probably because he used a bunch already to finish Sacred Lord Dark Soul. Otherwise, that fight shouldn't have finished so quickly. Ninth prince, don't come over. Zhao Feng managed to squeeze out a bit of his soul intent and spoke weakly. Draconic providence could increase the battle power of those with the imperial bloodline. However, the ninth prince didn't specialize in the soul Dao, so he wouldn't be able to affect the situation very much. He would only be wasting his draconic providence. Humph, you don't specialize in the soul. Using draconic providence to increase your battle power will do nothing. The Emperor of Death laughed coldly and completely ignored the ninth prince. The ninth prince acted as if he didn't hear what either of them said. He relied on the protection of the draconic providence to slowly arrive within 100 miles of Zhao Feng. A white glow of light suddenly shot out from the ninth prince's pseudo-crown prince seal, and it transformed into a golden dragon claw before landing on Zhao Feng's body. Wang tilde. A layer of gold light and draconic providence surrounded Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng, this is all I can do for you. After doing this, the ninth prince took the dim pseudo-crown prince seal and quickly retreated. Damn it, this brat. The Emperor of Death cursed. This layer of draconic providence had a unique power similar to destruction or death, and it instantly reduced the pressure of the gaze of death. Zhao Feng's eyes became tough, and he fully circulated his eye intent in an attempt to pull out the Emperor of Death's soul. Unfortunately, this draconic providence could only protect him momentarily. If Zhao Feng could actually use the draconic providence, then he could use it to increase the power of his gaze of the god's eye. Humph, even draconic providence will eventually wither. The Emperor of Death snickered coldly as more intent of death poured out from his black eyes and increased the power. Wang tilde. The draconic providence shield around Zhao Feng's body started to dim, but the erosion within Zhao Feng's body and soul was very small. No. The gaze of death circulates the intent of death to the maximum while my gaze of the god eye only uses a bit of the Tao of illusion. The Emperor of Death's soul is so strong that it can basically just ignore my technique. Zhao Feng used the chance while he was safe to think. Sacred kings couldn't enter the imperial tombs, and the power of the god-slaying arrow had reached the level of a sacred king, so he obviously couldn't use it. Furthermore, even if he did use the god-slaying arrow, it wouldn't truly kill the Emperor of Death, so what was the point of wasting it? However, what else could Zhao Feng do in order to deal with this life and death danger? What, have you given up? Ha ha ha. The Emperor of Death felt Zhao Feng's gaze of the god eye weaken, and he instantly started to laugh. Break. The Emperor of Death's cold voice sounded. Who tilde? The draconic providence around Zhao Feng's body was engulfed by the intent of death, and limitless power of death once again surrounded Zhao Feng like hundreds of millions of venomous snakes. Life started to fade away, and the soul started to wither. The eyes of death contain the intent of death. Then what about my god's eye? Zhao Feng had a question as he felt the limitless power of death around him. If that's the case. A mysterious golden light suddenly started to flash in Zhao Feng's left eye, and his golden hair blew wildly. In the dimension of his left eye, the mysterious golden ball started to move, and a golden ripple that seemed to contain the origin of everything in the world started to spread. God. Eye. Disintegration. A golden purple light started to spin in Zhao Feng's left eye, and it instantly passed through the Emperor of Death. What is this? The Emperor of Death's soul returned to his body after the gaze of the god's eye ended, but this mysterious golden ripple made him feel uncomfortable. The Emperor of Death suddenly realized that part of his body was slowly disappearing. Atoms that couldn't be seen by the naked eye were slowly disappearing, as if they didn't even exist in the first place. Everything the Emperor of Death had was disappearing. What is this power? The Emperor of Death cried out in fear. His laws of death made everything, including both physical objects and the soul, slowly age until death. However, even the Emperor of Death didn't understand the theory behind this mysterious power that Zhao Feng was displaying. It was like a person watching their hands and feet suddenly disappear until they just completely faded away from the world. At the end, the Emperor of Death would have nothing left and disappear completely. Wang tilde. The mysterious ball within the dimension of Zhao Feng's left eye released countless rays of golden light every second. My eye intent is being used up so quickly. Zhao Feng jumped up in fright. The God Eye disintegration used the power within the mysterious golden ball to disperse the Emperor of Death's body. In terms of power, it was on par with the gaze of death. However, Zhao Feng was able to fight back against the power of death, while the Emperor of Death could only watch as everything that belonged to him slowly faded away. The Emperor of Death's body was soon disintegrated, leaving behind the Emperor of Death's soul floating in the air. Zhao Feng could still sense the atoms of the samsara immortal body slowly gathering together in an attempt to recover, but the rate of its recovery wasn't as fast as the rate of its dispersal. Emperor of Death, slowly disappear from this world, Zhao Feng's cold voice sounded. How is this possible? Even if your God Eye evolved again, you can't have such a weird ability. The Emperor of Death yelled in fear. The reason he was scared was because the samsara immortal body that disappeared wasn't recovering. The Emperor of Death wondered whether he would ever wake up from the samsara of death again if he completely disappeared. Zhao Feng's sacred lightning body was weak, he lost several thousand years of his lifespan, and his body was starting to wither, but the Emperor of Death's body had completely disappeared and his soul was becoming transparent. As his soul faded away, the strength of his soul power was obviously reduced, resulting in the gaze of death becoming weaker. Sigh. Zhao Feng felt that his powerful eye intent was about to be all used up, and a painful sensation appeared from his left eye. If he kept this up, Zhao Feng would lose even more, and the Emperor of Death would just be able to revive from the samsara of death again even if he was completely disintegrated. Wang. Zhao Feng's eye intent touched the mysterious golden ball once more, and the frequency of the ripples sped up. The Emperor of Death's soul started to fade away into nothingness even faster. Ever since he acquired the samsara immortal body, the Emperor of Death had never felt such fear. My samsara immortal body still hasn't recovered yet. The Emperor of Death suddenly stopped the gaze of death. Run. The Emperor of Death's dim soul turned into a dark streak of light and tried to run away. Want to run away? Humph. Zhao Feng snickered coldly and used the gaze of the God's Eye again without care for his eye intent. A strong suction force came from Zhao Feng's golden left eye. Zhao Feng was ready this time, he wouldn't let the Emperor of Death's Yuan soul run away so easily like last time. Once the Emperor of Death entered the dimension of Zhao Feng's left eye, he would lock him up and never let him die, preventing him from reviving through the samsara of death. However, a ripple suddenly appeared in the air and gave off an unresistible force. A pair of hell-like eyes slowly came into sight above the Emperor of Death's weak soul, and a ripple of darkness started to spin slowly like the samsara of life and death. His life and death belong to the samsara of death. Chapter 970, Stealing the Eye. His life and death belong to the samsara of death. A pair of hell-like dark yellow eyes slowly came into sight above the Emperor of Death's weak soul, and a ripple of darkness started to spin slowly like the samsara of life and death. Everything within 1,000 miles that had just escaped from the destruction of Zhao Feng's God Eye and the intent of death suddenly fell into the abyss of samsara once more. The entire world went dark, as if it was a prison. When Zhao Feng looked at the pair of dark yellow eyes, he seemed to see his past and future. The ring of black in the eye was like the destiny of life, which he was unable to see. So, this is the Eye of Samsara? Zhao Feng was stunned. The Eye of Samsara had the ability to make a soul immortal by creating the samsara immortal body. There were also other abilities that Zhao Feng didn't even know of. At this moment, the Eye of Samsara had descended into the imperial tombs. However, the Eye of Samsara's target wasn't Zhao Feng, it was the Emperor of Death. A powerful intent suddenly shot out from the Eye of Samsara that made even Zhao Feng's powerful soul intent shake. A pulling force appeared from the Eye of Samsara, and the Emperor of Death's soul slowly moved away from Zhao Feng's gaze of the God Eye as it was dragged upward by an even stronger force. This suction force completely surpassed Zhao Feng's gaze of the God Eye. After all, Zhao Feng just used the God Eye disintegration, which almost completely used up Zhao Feng's eye intent. Zhao Feng was currently at his limits. Hu tilde. At the same instant, The Emperor of Death's samsara immortal body started to slowly recover and wrap around the Emperor of Death's soul since Zhao Feng was no longer using his god-eye disintegration. Seeing this, the Emperor of Death let out a breath. He originally thought that the samsara immortal body wouldn't work anymore. From the looks of it, even though Zhao Feng's god-eye had evolved, he was still unable to kill the Emperor of Death, who had fallen into the samsara of death. Zhao Feng, my pursuit will never end. After you leave the imperial tombs, I will acquire the samsara immortal body of a sacred lord and wait for you. The Emperor of Death went with the flow of the eye of samsara and slowly entered the samsara of death, leaving the range of Zhao Feng's gaze of the god-eye. Zhao Feng had an ugly expression, and anger seemed to burn through his eyes. The Emperor of Death's soul had reached the beginning stages of the mystic light realm. If he was able to obtain a samsara immortal body at the beginning stage mystic light realm as well, then his battle power would increase dramatically. At that point in time, soul attacks wouldn't be the Emperor of Death's only forte, the power of death from his physical attacks would also threaten Zhao Feng greatly. After all, Zhao Feng's sacred lightning body didn't have the undying attribute yet. If it was destroyed, Zhao Feng would have to start recultivating again. Seeing the Emperor of Death's soul and samsara immortal body slowly enter the eye of samsara, Zhao Feng's expression changed. His eyes became decisive. Who? Zhao Feng stopped the gaze of the god-eye and closed his eyes. He. The Emperor of Death laughed after seeing Zhao Feng stop the gaze of the god-eye. He belonged to the samsara of death. Even if Zhao Feng was at his peak state, his gaze of the god-eye wouldn't be able to surpass the samsara of death. However, Zhao Feng's left eye suddenly opened, and a faint golden beam of light shone onto the Emperor of Death's head and went straight through it. What is this? The Emperor of Death paused for a moment. This power didn't seem to be made of physical or soul power, and it didn't affect him at all. It was as if it didn't belong in this dimension. But even if it did affect him, so what? The Emperor of Death smiled when he saw that Zhao Feng's technique was useless. The Emperor of Death's soul had fallen into the samsara of death and he had the samsara immortal body, meaning that he couldn't die. What could Zhao Feng possibly do to him? Disperse, Zhao Feng gently said as the faint golden light suddenly drew a circle around the Emperor of Death's right eye. The Emperor of Death had a disdainful expression, but he suddenly felt a weird sensation in his soul. This is? The Emperor of Death's expression changed dramatically. His left eye saw a terrifying scene, his right eye slowly floated out. His eyes of death were obtained through a soul inheritance, so he still had them even after being revived. At this moment, there was a hole where the Emperor of Death's right eye should have been. An eye of death floated in the air in front of his soul. Spatial movement. A spatial disturbance started to appear around the right eye of death. The Emperor of Death seemed to think of something, and his expression turned to fear and panic. Although his right eye of death had left his soul, it still contained his soul intent. Destruct. Self-destruct. The Emperor of Death could still connect to the right eye of death. As long as he destroyed the right eye of death, it would appear again from the samsara of death. However, in the next instant, the right eye of death completely disappeared, and so did the connection between the Emperor of Death and the right eye of death. Zhao Feng, my eye of death. Where did you hide my eye of death? The Emperor of Death failed to self-destruct his eye of death and roared. His expression became twisted, and he acted like was insane. The whole reason he started chasing Zhao Feng in the first place was to steal his ninth god's eye, but now his own right eye of death was stolen by that very same Zhao Feng. The Emperor of Death couldn't handle it. He knew that Zhao Feng had hidden his right eye somewhere. How is this possible? You actually dug out my eye of death? This is impossible. The Emperor of Death almost became crazy, and he struggled in an attempt to escape the suction force of the eye of samsara. He wanted to charge at Zhao Feng and skin him alive. He couldn't understand what kind of power that mysterious light was or how it could separate his eye of death from his soul. The Emperor of Death struggled and used his intent of death to fight back against the eye of samsara, but how could he possibly escape from the eye of samsara? Zhao Feng, give back my eye of death. The Emperor of Death was completely sucked into the eye of samsara. When you come next time, remember to give me your other eye of death. Zhao Feng's joyful voice sounded as he expressed his thanks to the Emperor of Death. After losing one eye of death, the power of the gaze of death would reduce dramatically. Even if he had a beginning stage sacred lord level samsara immortal body next time, Zhao Feng wouldn't need to be scared of him. Who? The Eye of Samsara gave a glance at Zhao Feng after sucking away the Emperor of Death, then slowly closed and faded into the air. Eye of Samsara. Zhao Feng murmured as he descended from the sky and sat down on the ground. Although his intent and the mysterious golden ball had already been depleted, Zhao Feng still used one more God Eye disintegration at the end. A piercing pain and a sleepy sensation washed over Zhao Feng's left eye. He immediately used some herbs and medicine. Zhao Feng was extremely weak right now. After being eroded by the intent of death, both his soul and state of existence had been weakened, but luckily, Zhao Feng's foundation was very strong. He would be able to recover pretty quickly. Zhao Feng circulated the wood of wind lightning to complement the medicine and heal his body and soul. His withered body soon started to recover. Zhao Feng's recovery speed was extremely strong. As long as he had enough life force, he could recover. I wonder what this Eye of Death can do for me. Zhao Feng's consciousness entered the dimension of his left eye. An Eye of Death that existed in a soul-like state floated quietly above the mysterious golden ball. It contained the Emperor of Death's soul intent, but it was completely suppressed. After I recover, I'll use the God Tribulation Lightning to get rid of the intent of death, but this Eye of Death. Zhao Feng murmured. Zhao Feng had obtained a technique known as the Forbidden Eye Stealing Technique from the Three-Eyed Saint. It contained information and theories behind stealing and transplanting an eye, but no one had tried it yet. Furthermore, this knowledge was only based on physical objects, and it was relatively low-level. The Eye of Death that Zhao Feng currently had existed in a soul state. If I fail, the Eye of Death might be destroyed, which would return it to the Emperor of Death. Zhao Feng's heart became heavy. Even if Zhao Feng had a complete eye-stealing technique, he wouldn't dare to use it. Zhao Feng decided to leave the Eye of Death in the dimension of his God Eye for now. This would at least get rid of the trouble that the Emperor of Death posed. A one-eyed Emperor of Death wouldn't be able to threaten Zhao Feng. Within a sea of bamboo, a transparent Eye of Samsara appeared in front of an elder. A black-robed body suddenly descended from the Eye of Samsara. Your freedom ends here, the elder said. No, don't. Zhao Feng took away my Eye of Death. I need to get it back and steal his God Eye. The Emperor of Death knelt on the ground and begged in pain. You can't succeed. The elder had a calm expression as he looked into the distance with a pair of dark eyes. No, if you had given me the samsara immortal body of a beginning stage mystic light realm from the start, I wouldn't have lost. The Emperor of Death roared with anger and hatred. Humph. The black circle in the elder's eyes suddenly started to spin. Arg. Don't. The black symbols and curses around the Emperor of Death started to blink, and an irresistible power of samsara was released. The Emperor of Death's soul and body started to twist and slowly rip apart. Boom. The Emperor of Death's body and soul were shattered into pieces under extreme pain. The next instant, a black figure seemed to appear in the elder's Eye of Samsara. The elder then slowly walked toward a bamboo room. Disciple, come tell me your dream from yesterday. Okay. A young girl clad in faint green with a pair of clear eyes within the bamboo room gave a faint smile. She gave others a calm and peaceful feeling. In the dream, my father was a city lord, and just as the fight to become my fiancé was about to come to an end, a one-eyed youth arrived, but I can't remember his name.